All right, so are you ready to dive into Gladiator 2?
Oh, absolutely I am. I mean, how could I not be?
Right. I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at first. Gladiator is such a classic.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even follow that up after 24 years?
Yeah, I get that. The original really set the bar high, but honestly, Ridley Scott totally delivers with this one.
He does.
Right.
And, I think what impressed me the most was that he didn't try to just rehash the first film.
Yeah.
It's not a remake or a reboot.
It's its own thing.
Exactly. It builds on the legacy of Gladiator,
Yeah.
but takes the story in a whole new direction.
And I think that's one of the things that makes it so compelling. It's not just a sequel, it's like a whole new chapter in the story of Rome.
Totally. And the fact that it focuses on Lucius, Lucilla's son,
Oh, I
a
know.
kid who was basically adopted by Maximus.
Oh, yeah. It's like, talk about a character arc, right?
I know, we're seeing him decades later, all grown up, and
Mhm.
played by the incredible Paul Mescal.
Amazing casting. Really brings that tortured hero vibe to life.
Oh, absolutely. And he's dealing with some serious baggage, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah. Heavy stuff.
Not just the legacy of Maximus, which is huge in itself,
Right. Like living up to that legend, impossible.
but also his mother, Lucilla, and her role in the whole, the events of the first film.
Yeah, all that political turmoil, trying to protect him. Tough choices.
Talk about complicated family dynamics.
I mean, serious.
And then on top of all that, you have this whole backdrop of a crumbling Roman Empire.
yeah.
Like, things have gotten even worse since the first Gladiator.
Oh, way worse. The empire is literally falling apart at the seams.
It's not just about the gladiatorial games anymore. It's about survival, power, betrayal, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. You really feel that sense of urgency that everything is at stake.
And the crazy thing is, even with all that seriousness, the plot is anything but predictable.
Oh, no.
There are twists and turns I never saw coming. There's this one in particular, and I won't spoil it for anyone, but it was like something straight out of Breaking Bad.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. My jaw dropped.
It's that good. And the political intrigue, don't even get me started.
Oh, it's so juicy. You've got these two warring emperors, Geta and Caracalla.
Talk about a dysfunctional family.
Oh my God, they're constantly scheming and backstabbing each other. It's like a Shakespearean tragedy.
And then you throw Denzel Washington into the mix as this gladiator trainer, Maximus.
Oh man, Denzel steals every scene he's in.
Seriously. You're never quite sure whose side he's on, what his motives are. He's got this, quiet intensity that's so captivating.
It's like he's always playing 5 steps ahead of everyone else.
It totally reminded me of his role in Training Day,
Absolutely. That same kind of moral ambiguity.
Yeah, you can't tell if he's a good guy or a bad guy.
Yeah.
Or maybe a little bit of both.
It's brilliant. And it adds this whole other layer of complexity to the political landscape.
Oh, for sure.
You've got all these power struggles happening on a grand scale, but then you also have these really intimate moments of manipulation and betrayal.
Right, you're constantly trying to figure out who to trust, who's playing who.
It keeps you guessing until the very end.
And speaking of scene stealing, can we talk about the villains for a second? Because Joseph Quinn and Fred Hetchinger as Geta and Caracalla, they are amazing.
They're so good. I almost found myself rooting for them at times, even though they were, terrible people.
They're so cunning, so ruthless, just the right amount of crazy.
Totally. They bring such a delicious energy to those roles.
And then there's Pedro Pascal as General Acacius.
I love him in everything.
He's fantastic, right? He plays this Roman general who's so conflicted, torn between his loyalty to Rome and his own personal code of honor.
He embodies that struggle so well, you can really see the weight of his decisions.
And then, of course, we have to talk about the action.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's Ridley Scott, right? The man knows how to deliver epic spectacle.
Oh, absolutely. But what I really appreciated about the action in Gladiator 2 is that it's not just gratuitous.
Oh, for sure.
It's all connected to the story, to Lucius's journey, and the political turmoil that's going on.
And it's intense. There's this one scene in the arena, a flooded Colosseum with sharks. Sharks.
Can you believe that?
It's insane.
That visual, though.
It's visually stunning.
Yeah.
And so well executed. It's how did they even film that?
Ridley Scott, man. He's a master.
He is. And it's not just the action sequences themselves.
Yeah.
It's the cinematography, the sound design, Harry Gregson Williams' score.
It's everything.
Everything comes together to create this truly immersive experience.
You're right there in ancient Rome, feeling the grit, the heat, the danger.
And you know what else struck me? The visual tone of this film is very different from the original Gladiator.
Yeah. You're right. It's much grittier, more realistic.
Almost documentary-like at times. It feels like a more, I don't know, decaying vision of Rome.
It's like you can feel the empire crumbling, not just politically, but physically, too.
Exactly. And that adds to the whole atmosphere of the film.
It's a deliberate choice, for sure, and it works so well.
It does. It's a subtle but powerful way to reflect themes of decline and corruption that are so central to the story.
It's like the visuals are telling a story all their own.
And ultimately, Gladiator, to that, it's a film about legacy. It's about responsibility. It's about finding your place in a world that feels like it's falling apart.
It's about what we inherit from the past and the choices we make that shape the future.
It's deep.
Yeah.
But it's also a really thrilling, entertaining, and visually spectacular film.
Yeah. It's a great blend of substance and spectacle.
So before we jump into some other key aspects of the film, I want to ask you, did you find yourself comparing Lucius to Maximus? Like, did he live up to that impossible legacy?
Ooh, good question. It's tough, right? It's hard not to write. I mean, Maximus cast such a long shadow.
He really did. But I think Lucius's journey is fascinating in its own right. He's not trying to be Maximus.
No, not at all. He's figuring out his own path. And it's not an easy one, let me tell you.
Especially with Rome, like literally falling apart around him.
Right. Like everywhere he looks, there's corruption and decay. It's like the whole empire's rotting from the inside out.
And you really get that sense visually, too.
Oh, absolutely. The visual tone of Gladiator 2 is so different from the original.
Way grittier.
Way grittier, much more realistic. It's like you can almost smell the grime and the sweat.
And it makes sense, right? I mean, Rome isn't this glorious powerhouse anymore.
Not at all. It is shadow of its former self. And that's reflected in everything from the costumes to the sets to the lighting.
Yeah, it's definitely more, I don't know, a more visceral experience.
It is. And it makes the stakes feel even higher because you realize that Lucius isn't just fighting for his own survival. He's fighting for something much bigger.
He's fighting for the soul of Rome.
Exactly. And that's where the whole idea of legacy really comes into play.
Yeah.
Because he's not just carrying the weight of Maximus's actions.
Right.
He's also carrying the weight of all the choices that led to Rome's decline. All the mistakes, the betrayals, the corruption.
It's like he's trying to redeem the past while also building a better future.
Exactly. And that's a pretty heavy burden for anyone to carry, let alone someone as young as Lucius.
And speaking of carrying burdens, the other characters in this film are dealing with some serious stuff too.
Oh, for sure. I mean, none of them have it easy.
Like General Acacius, played by Pedro Pascal.
Oh, he's amazing in this.
He is. He plays this Roman general who's so conflicted.
Torn between his duty to Rome and his own personal code of honor. It's a tough spot to be in.
And Pascal really conveys that inner turmoil. You can see him wrestling with every decision, every compromise he has to make.
And then you have Denzel Washington as Maximus, the gladiator trainer.
Okay, seriously. Denzel Washington is a force of nature in this film.
He is. He steals every scene he's in.
Yeah.
And his character is so complex, like, you never quite know what his motives are.
Right. Is he trying to help Lucius or use him? It's hard to tell.
Exactly. And that ambiguity makes him so compelling. He's like a puppet master pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
And he brings this intensity to the role that's just, I don't know, it's electric.
It's magnetic. You can't take your eyes off him.
And then, of course, you have the villains.
Oh, yes, the villains.
Geta and Caracalla, the two warring emperors. They are just, I mean, they're deliciously evil.
They're so much fun to watch. They're cunning, they're ruthless, and they're completely out for themselves.
And Joseph Quinn and Fred Hetchinger play them to perfection. Like, they really chew the scene.
Oh, they do. They bring this energy to those roles. It's just so entertaining.
And the crazy thing is, even though they're terrible people, you kind of almost root for them at times.
I know. It's like they're so bad, they're good.
Exactly. But, you know, one thing I found really interesting about all these characters, the heroes and the villains, is that they're all so deeply flawed.
Oh, for sure.
None of them are perfect. They all make mistakes. They all compromise their values in some way.
And that makes them feel so much more real, so much more human.
Exactly. Because in the end, Gladiator 6 isn't just about good versus evil. It's about the gray areas.
It's about the choices we make when faced with impossible situations and the consequences of those choices.
And speaking of choices, one of the things that struck me about Gladiator 2 was how it portrayed the gladiatorial games.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we know they were brutal in ancient Rome, but in this film, they feel even more so.
Definitely more visceral, more violent, more dehumanizing.
It's like they're a reflection of Rome itself, Like the empire has lost its way and the games have become this symbol of its decadence.
Yeah. And it makes you think about the nature of spectacle, about how we as humans are drawn to violence.
And how that can be exploited. Like in the film, you see how the emperors are using the games for their own political gain. They're manipulating the crowds, turning them against each other.
And the gladiators themselves are just pawns in their game.
Which is kind of heartbreaking, right? Because these are real people with their own stories, their own families.
Right. And they're being forced to fight to the death for the amusement of the masses.
And that's something that Lucius really grapples with, too. Like, he's forced to confront his own mortality, his own capacity for violence. And it's not easy for him.
No, he's a good man at heart. But he's also a product of his environment.
And ultimately, I think that's one of the things that Gladiator today does so well.
What's that?
It forces you to think about the complex realities of war and violence and the toll it takes on everyone involved.
It really makes you question what it means to be a hero in a world like that.
Right. Like, is it even possible to hold on to your ideals when you're surrounded by so much darkness?
And I think that's one of the things that makes Lucius's journey so compelling. He's not just fighting for survival, he's fighting for his soul.
Yeah, and it's not just about physical strength or military prowess.
It's about something more.
Exactly. It's about compassion. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Even when it seems like all hope is lost.
In a way that makes him even more heroic than Maximus.
Because he's facing even greater challenges.
Right. Like Maximus was this legendary warrior, but Lucius, he's just a guy trying to make sense of a world that's gone mad.
And yet he finds a way to make a difference.
He does. And that's what makes the ending of this film so powerful.
Because it shows that even in the darkest of times, there's still hope.
There's still a chance for redemption.
And that even ordinary people can do extraordinary things.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the characters, the themes, the visuals, but I think we need to address the elephant in the room.
What's that?
The ending.
Oh, the ending.
I don't want to give anything away, but let's just say it's a doozy.
It's definitely one that will stay with you.
It left me with so many questions like, what does Lucius's fate mean for Rome? Did he succeed in his mission?
And what about the other characters? Where do they go from here?
It's one of those endings that makes you want to talk about it, to debate it, to dissect it.
And that's the mark of a truly great film, I think.
It stays with you long after you've seen it. It makes you think, it makes you feel, and it leaves you wanting more.
It definitely does. So, what did you think?
Well, I think it's safe to say that Gladiator 2 is more than just a sequel.
It's a film that stands on its own.
It's a story that's both epic and intimate.
It's a visual masterpiece.
And it's a film that will stay with us for a long time to come.
Absolutely.
So to all our viewers out there, if you've seen Gladiator 2, we want to hear from you. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts on the ending? Let us know in the comments below.
And if you haven't seen it yet, what are you waiting for?
Go check it out, and then come back here and tell us all about it. Until next time, keep those reels rolling.